Hello, friends, and welcome to the June 10th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Outreach Director, and today's episode is being brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas. And today, we are excited to be joined by a good friend of the program, John Johnson, with ELCA Advocacy to talk about federal legislation as part of our series highlighting speakers with the Washington Interreligious Staff Community, or WISC. But before we do that, I feel like we have to take a moment at the top to once again recognize the immense pain that the nation is feeling right now. Y'all, 2020 has not been a fun year. In addition to the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic, our nation is once again being confronted by the ugly truths of systemic racism. We see the results in our streets, in our cities, and on our television screens as hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of people are peacefully marching or rallying for change. And we've seen Texas clergy respond in major ways by marching, by preaching, by teaching, by advocating. And Texas Impact is working to amplify those voices and those efforts. Last week, we created a webpage with links to sermons, liturgies, and songs from Texas congregations that were addressing racial injustice. You can go to texasimpact.org and click on the Witness for Racial Justice link to find those. If you have resources to add to that list, you can email the links to me at scott@texasimpact.org, and we'll get those added to the list. And you can keep an eye out for even more resources in the weeks and months to come. Texans of Faith, we have work to do to address all of the concerns facing our state and our nation right now. We have to take steps to address racial injustice. We have to respond to the health and economic devastation being caused by COVID-19. And that's in addition to all of the other issues that we talk so much about and that you all care so much about. And we hope that you have a plan to do that this year. We hope that you're planning on meeting with your legislators and candidates for office. We hope that you're preparing for the 2021 Texas legislative session by joining the Rapid Response Team or legislative engagement group in your district. And we hope that you have a plan to vote in 2020. And we hope that you'll organize your friends and congregations to do the same. As part of that effort and to resource your efforts, Texas Impact has launched Texas Faith Votes, which includes a pledge to vote that can be found on our website, again, at texasimpact.org. And we hope that you will join with Texans of Faith to let candidates for office know that Texans of Faith prioritize health, immigration, climate, and non-discrimination. So make sure that you sign that pledge and make sure that you're encouraging your congregations to do the same. We care about those issues, and we will vote. This is an important time for Texans of Faith to raise our voices. Our communities need us to be active and engaged, speaking out for justice and working to bring it about through advocacy and the ballot box. So let's covenant together to work toward that change. So with that, long open today. Sorry about that, John, but I am excited to welcome to the conversation John Johnson with ELCA Advocacy. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My official title is Program Director for Domestic Policy with the ELCA's, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America's Advocacy Office in Washington, D.C. Just a quick note that we have a number of fantastic staff that cover a number of policy, including environment and international peace and justice and housing and homelessness, immigration, you name it, we cover it. We're joined by our colleagues in New York around the United Nations, and then we also engage in corporate responsible investing. And so we try to leverage all of the leverage points of the church to do good and to impact public policy.
Yeah, so you guys do incredible work, and we're excited to be a partner with you all. We had Trini on a couple of weeks ago talking about immigration. So if you like what John has to say today and are interested in learning more about their thoughts on immigration, you can go check out the Weekly Witness from a couple of weeks ago, featuring Trini Aristia. I had to work on making sure I got the name right. So thanks for that introduction to your office. Can you talk some about how you partner with other faith organizations in DC?
Sure. Well, I think the bottom line is we don't go it alone. You mentioned the Washington Interreligious Staff Community, and that is what I like to say is that WISC is one of the best kept secrets in Washington, D.C. It's more than 80 faith-based organizations that do some kind of federal advocacy, and we all know each other. And so we take that opportunity to work together in different working groups around different policy areas. And when we meet with our legislators and congressmen and senators, we do it together. And I love more than anything that it's interfaith. And so we will have Christian, we'll have Muslim, we'll have Jewish groups all at a table with staff or a member. And we're advocating from a same place of faith that you should love your neighbor, and that we as a country love our neighbors in many different ways, including through how we operate our government and expect our policymakers to use our resources.
So I do think it's a powerful witness that so many faith groups can come together and work for positive change. But you also do some great work in mobilizing evangelical Lutherans throughout the United States through the state public policy offices, of which Texas Impact is one. Can you talk some about that network and the work that they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Our state public policy office network is the envy of many of our denominational partners because we're in almost 18 states, I think. And having that kind of reach and impact is really, really amazing. I love to tell the story. For a very limited amount of money, we in the State Public Policy Office Network, including Texas Impact, leverage billions, that's B with billion, billions with a B, dollars of public dollars for public good. And that's not a small, that's not, as they say, a few billion there, a few billion there, and you're talking real money. And we impact real money. And it's something that I think that the return on investment from people who give to World Hunger, ELCA World Hunger, who are part of, who help fund our advocacy ministries, should know that when you're supporting World Hunger, you're helping to make systemic change all around the nation, and we always want to say thank you for that.
Well, certainly, thank you for that work. And I'll say, as somebody who's been able to participate in that network, that being able to learn from the experiences of other organizations throughout the country who are doing similar work at the state level has really enhanced the work of Texas Impact, as well as having the opportunity to hear from you and folks who are in DC, being able to tell us what's going on at the federal level so we can amplify that message out into the state has really made our folks more effective advocates. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation today so you can fill us in on exactly what is happening in Washington, D.C. in response to COVID-19 and everything else. So we've talked for the last couple of weeks about the HEROES Act, which was passed almost a month ago as kind of, I think, the fourth stimulus, or now I've lost track, as one of the stimulus bills to help us respond to COVID-19. So our speakers the last couple of weeks have suggested that the Senate might try to pass some kind of bill by July 4th. Does that still sound right, or where do you think we are in that process?
So I think that you're absolutely right. The HEROES Act passed in the House several weeks ago was a very comprehensive, very important and thoughtful piece of legislation that really did aim at the comprehensive needs, economic, health-wise, disparity-wise, all over across the board. It was a very, very comprehensive piece of legislation. The Senate is a different chamber, and it has a different set of leadership and priorities. And so their initial response was very disappointing in that they had no appetite whatsoever to even examine the HEROES Act. We've had some ups and downs with this in the sense that the Senate then did come around and say, we do need to do something. We need to look at the impacts of COVID-19 on the economy and on health and our response to it. So something may need to be done. Many of your listeners may remember that last week, however, a positive jobs report came out, and that may have tempered, albeit not for long, I think, that may have tempered a potential Senate response. But we do know that there's still great need. There is incredible, incredible need. And so we're working today, in fact, to push senators to act. And we do that in lots of different ways. But one of the more creative ways is that we solicited videos from faith leaders all across the country. And we've actually sent up a press release to the Hill, and the short 2-minute videos of faith leaders all across the country talking about why the Senate needs to take up new legislation from their moral centering. And we're very excited about that effort. And hopefully our voices continue to make a difference and the Senate will act.
So what are the sticking points on that piece of legislation that Texans of Faith should be paying attention to?
Well, I think that it's really important that any package have significant increases in SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. I like to say that SNAP is one of the most important programs for responding to hunger in an economic crisis. SNAP is good for businesses. It helps create commerce. SNAP is good for our farmers. It helps them create products and produce and supplies, and it's good for hungry people. It is a program that I think represents the best character of our country. And as an entitlement program, when economic or disaster hit, SNAP can increase quickly. And when the economy returns to normal, it contracts just as quickly. And that's why I think that one of the most important things that we can be doing when we call our members is say, listen, SNAP needs to be increased, even temporarily, because that's what we're in. We're in a temporary situation, hopefully. And it is really important that members of Congress hear our voices, that we care about hungry people. And when you've lost your job or you've been furloughed from your job, the last thing that you need to be worrying about is where your next meal comes from.
So as we make our telephone calls to our members of Congress today, I think sounds like sooner is better than later. Is there anything besides SNAP that you'd hope folks will be calling on?
You know, I think we need to recognize a couple of things. One, if our economy wasn't that great, if all of a sudden millions of people lost their jobs and didn't have any backup, right? If so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, we can't really say our economy is the greatest. And so I think that we need to talk about how we ensure that working families have the ability long term to weather certain storms in life, whether they be health crisis or an economic crisis or a job crisis or child crisis. We as a nation have to have a strong safety net of a variety of services that ensure that people don't fall below a certain level. COVID has also really torn back the curtain on a number of racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare and in jobs and in learning, and we see, and one of the things that we see both in like rural areas and in urban areas, you can see the access to internet for learning is difficult in both places sometimes, and so there are just a number of disparities, and that we as a country, I don't think want to return to normal. I think we want to return to better, and we don't always need to focus on any one particular policy. But if policymakers are hearing people say, you're our leader and you've got to find a way to help us get back to better, then it's really on them to find those policy solutions. And we just need to use our moral voice to encourage action.
So I wonder if, the telephone calls this week for Texans who are listening should be to Senators Cornyn and Cruz. And, I wonder if that is the overriding message that folks in my community, folks in my congregation are hurting. We need some leadership. We need the Senate to act soon. Is that?
That's it. I mean, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a policy expert. Right. I don't consider myself a policy expert. I consider myself knowing a little about a lot, but I think that at the end of the day, it's not my policy expertise that gives me credibility. It's my faith and my moral grounding that we love our neighbors as ourselves, and there's a way to execute that in a government like ours.
So, listeners, you have your challenge for this week. Organize some folks in your congregation to make a call to your senators to encourage them to act. That HEROES Act legislation had a lot of our priorities in it, and so we'd love for as much of it to be included in the Senate version as possible. So, one question I personally have is, how are offices in D.C. responding? Are they back at work in offices yet, or are folks answering the phone from their apartments? Where are we now, and do we need to adjust our advocacy efforts because of however they're operating?
So I've seen the insides of a lot of my colleagues' homes over the last several weeks. I think that we've moved to virtual office work. It can be more demanding in terms of normally, I think our custom is to, meet together as a group and discuss policies and issues, and then we are able to break from that. And right now we are sort of locked in these calendar blocks, hour by hour, in Zoom calls and conference calls, and so while a lot of our work was done that way before, I think there is a challenge sometimes of creativity in trying to figure out how to be more creative in a challenging time, and we've done that, like with the video project, getting bunches of, instead of having people call in, we've had people send videos and we package them together and we're able to send them to the Hill. So that's a unique way that we have responded, I think, to the pandemic. We have a lot of conference calls now with staff, whereas it was easy, where we preferred, for that personal connection, to go and meet with that member staff or the member, sometimes in the hall, sometimes in an office, sometimes in a conference room. But now we really have to depend on technology in ways that listeners who have kids have now learned it very intimately that technology is a really important. It's not a luxury anymore. That's for sure. And I think that we've managed to stay connected. And I think the comment I hear often is, what would we have done if we didn't have this technology? How would we have made a difference? And so I think I'm sure we would have found the way, but I have to say that being able to do meetings, whether it's, I go from Skype to Zoom to Windows Teams, and it's a bit of juggling, but I think that we're going to see it through, and look forward to that day when we can have a meeting in a conference room again.
Out of all of this, I don't know that the one thing I'm most looking forward to is a meeting around a conference room table, but I share your hope for a better future. It has been inspiring for us. Our legislative engagement groups have many of them have had luck scheduling Zoom meetings with their members of the state legislature. And so I do appreciate members who are willing to make those arrangements, and people who forgive me for dogs barking in the background in the middle of a podcast. It is a different world that we're living in. So, John, in the midst of all of this negative news that we're hearing each and every day, what gives you hope?
Well, I love the sound of the dog. That makes me happy. I think that, I just think that, I'll tell you what gives me hope. So this weekend I was out in front of my church for the first time in months, masks on, giving out water to protesters who literally marched right in front of the street. And I was particularly moved by a woman who was FaceTiming as she was marching along, and she turned around and took a picture of us giving out water and said, this is the church. This is the church. And I think we can be the church in so many different ways. And we can be people of faith in so many ways, that even in the midst of a pandemic and so much racial tension and turmoil, that we absolutely have to confront, that people can see that the church is making a difference.
Yeah, it has been inspiring to have so many people. We launched the project where I mentioned at the beginning, where we have sermons and homilies from clergy talking about racial justice. Just seeing all of those come in and seeing the clips has been really inspiring to see the way the church has responded. Anything you'd like to shamelessly plug today, and where can we find you for more information?
Sure. If you'd like to know more about ELCA Advocacy, just go to elca.org/advocacy. We have a great website, and sign up for the action alerts, sign up for Texas Impact action alerts, and remember that policymakers are people. Say thank you, and never be afraid to develop a relationship with them.
Absolutely. And I'd add, I called my member of Congress a couple of weeks ago and was talking to the staff person who answered the phone, and we were just chatting about the fact that he was working from home with a couple of roommates and answering the member of Congress's call from there. So chat them up, right? They're real human beings who are going through the exact same things we are. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate the time, really appreciate your work.
Yeah, really enjoyed being here.
You are an incredible resource to all of us, both the folks in the state public policy offices, as well as Lutherans and people of faith throughout the country. So really grateful to you, for you and for your work. So thanks again.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for tuning in. We hope that you will share this content with your friends and congregations. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so even more Texans of Faith can join the movement for justice in the coming weeks and coming years. And remember that this work is supported by members like you, so make sure that you and your congregation join Texas Impact. You can do that by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, we know that these are anxious times, but in those times, the world needs the community of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.